Kia ora, koto katao. Warm greetings to you all and welcome to the first talk of the Connected and Develop series for 2023. I'm Peter Papagiannis, Alumni Relations Manager here at the University of Auckland. And it's a real pleasure to be with you today. We had over 175 registrations from alumni around the world and current students. So as you know, the world of work is changing more rapidly than ever before. And the Connect and Develop series is here to bring you the tools that can help you develop along the way. Today's topic, modern entrepreneurship, is particularly relevant as we need to continually create new products and services to address real-world challenges and shape the future. And we have an alumna speaker here today that can do just that. So our speaker today is entrepreneur Michal Garvey, who is the founder of the amazing app called Foodprint. And she was inducted into the University of Auckland's 40 Under 40 Disruptor and Innovators category in 2021. Joining Michal today is our MC, Nandini Singh. Nandini is a Bachelor of Commerce student studying finance and economics. Alongside her studies, she serves as the chair for the university's entrepreneurial development program called Velocity and was a recipient of the EY Business Student of the Year in 2022. Very impressive stuff. She is deeply passionate about supporting our community as well, creating a positive impact. She co-founded Kairos, a social enterprise that provides low decile high schoolers with the support and resources they need in order to take the next step towards their university education. So Nandini is going to share a bit more about our speaker here in a moment, and later they're going to have a great discussion before we open it up to all of you to ask your questions towards the end. So on behalf of all of us here at the University of Auckland, I'd like to say many thanks to Nandini and to Michal for volunteering their time to be a part of this series. We couldn't do it without you. Really appreciate it. And to everyone joining us today, I hope you find the webinar very useful. Take it away, Nandini.
Thank you, Peter. It's so great to be here. Before I start introducing Michal, I want to cover a few tips for participating in today's webinar. The Q&A function is live and is at the bottom of your on-screen Zoom panel. Please submit your questions at any time and we'll be monitoring them as we go. I also encourage you all to upvote questions you find the most interesting, as those will move to the top of the Q&A section. Towards the end of today's webinar, Michal will be going through and answering the highest rated questions. And now on to introducing today's speaker, Michal Garvey. Michal is the founder of Foodprint, an app that allows local eateries to sell surplus or imperfect food in order to prevent it from being wasted. Foodprint has been operating for the last 3 years. They've worked with 350 eateries and surpassed 70,000 customers, with plans to expand across Aotearoa. Prior to starting Foodprint, Michal worked for a global food tech company, and we're so pleased to have such an incredible entrepreneur joining us today. So without further ado, I will now hand it over to you, Michal.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko te rere te monga, ko tamaki te awa, ko Pākehā te iwi, no tamaki makoro aho, ko Garvey toko whānau, ko Michal toko ingoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora, and thanks so much for those introductions, both Peter and Nandini. Thanks to the University of Auckland for hosting this Connect and Develop webinar, and of course to you, our audience, for joining us today. So I'm Michal, and I'm the founder of Foodprint, which is an app where you can purchase surplus and imperfect food for a discount to prevent that food from being wasted. Today, I'm going to share some of my journey into the entrepreneurship world, how I ended up working in the food waste prevention space, and a few of my challenges and learnings along the way. To me, modern entrepreneurship takes on many different forms. I've got friends who run startups, who work as sole traders, who've started charities, who put on festivals, and who run agencies. While what we do is vastly different, we're all in our own ways modern entrepreneurs. And what all of these people have in common is their passion and drive for what they're doing and why they do it. I can assure you that running a business is hard, way harder than I ever could have imagined. And that's at the best of times. So it's really clear to me how important it is to be passionate about what you're doing and that you're in it for the right reasons. Because if you're not, those hard times will simply be so much harder. Over the last 4 years since I started Foodprint, I've had so many people say to me, wow, you're really brave for starting a business, or what you're doing is so scary. And yeah, at times it's utterly terrifying. But for me, starting my own business was also something that felt quite normal, as I'm the child of an entrepreneur. In fact, later this week, we are celebrating 25 years of my dad's business, which is an incredible achievement. And I'm super privileged and grateful to have grown up in a household where taking the leap into business was role modeled to me from a young age. That meant that for me, it was always a case of what and when, rather than if I'd venture into the entrepreneurial world. I just had to find a way of finding something that I'm passionate about and turning it into a business. Now, when I left school, I was one of those students who didn't really know what I wanted to do. So naturally, I enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Auckland. From memory, I think I started off thinking I'd either major in history or geography, but ended up with double majors in Māori studies and political science. While I was at university, I spent my summers going to Colorado for their winters so that I could snowboard and work in ski resorts. I was a banquet server in quite a luxury hotel, and this was the first time that I was really confronted by food waste firsthand. We would serve buffets, think the breakfast and events held in hotels, and often as much food as had ended up in people's bellies ended up in the bin at the end of a shift. I found this totally crazy, especially as someone who had always had a passion in sustainable food and the impacts that our food systems have on the environment. But when I questioned it, I was told that throwing out this food was just what we had to do. The rules were, because we had to have that much food on the buffet so that the guests could feel a sense of abundance and know that they could eat as much of that as whatever they wanted. But once the food had been on the buffet, it must be thrown out due to food safety. Even our staff, who were paid minimum wage, weren't really allowed to take food home. But I was never very good at following that rule. I ended up having a few OEs, and on my last one, I was in London working for HelloFresh. This was my introduction into food technology. There was also a lot of talk about how we reduced food waste due to the customers getting the exact right amount of ingredients for the recipes each week. And for the most part, I do believe that meal kits go a long way in reducing food waste at home. While I was at HelloFresh, they were in the process of moving from a contract picking and packing distribution centre into their own custom built one. They'd done quite a few trials with small numbers of boxes, but it was decided that they really needed to test the teams before they started production from that facility. Someone much higher up than me decided that 2,500 boxes was the number that we needed to pack to create the test and run it successfully. But just in case something went wrong, we weren't going to be able to count on those boxes for this week's deliveries. So myself and one of the founders, Patrick, were tasked with coming up with a solution. Basically, we stayed up for 72 hours and packed these 2,500 boxes into national rail train stations and other businesses near our Shoreditch business, and offered the boxes to people for whatever price they wanted to pay for them. That box retailed for around £40. We had people paying £1 and people paying up to £100 for them. And then we partnered with a local food rescue charity called the Felix Project, who, if anyone's familiar with the likes of Kaibosh or Kiwi Harvest here in Aotearoa, they work in a similar fashion, redistributing surplus food to people who need it. Over the 2 days that we ran this activation, we raised over £40,000 or almost £40,000 for the Felix Project. And as a result, they were able to invest in a new temperature-controlled vehicle, which meant that they were able to access new suburbs of London and help support thousands more people experiencing food insecurity. I didn't really know it at the time, but this event really cemented for me that working in the food waste space was an area that I wanted to continue in. After I left London, I went to Stockholm. I'd been on holiday to Sweden and thought it was a pretty livable city, even without knowing the language. Plus, I knew 2 people there. When I got there, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that if I had sort of understood a little bit more about technology or knew how to write a bit of code, that I would have been able to do so much more with my role. So I enrolled in a web development course. Now, honestly, if you had told the Michael that left Aotearoa in 2015, that just over 2 years later, I'd be living in Stockholm, learning Swedish, writing Ruby on Rails code and creating an e-commerce website, I would have thought you were absolutely mad, but there I was. Being a student in Scandinavia, I was always looking for ways to save money. Very expensive there. And a friend of mine introduced me to a couple of apps where you could look out for really great deals on food that otherwise might go to waste. It also seemed like a really great way of being able to explore a city through food, which is definitely one of my favorite things to do. Now, the first time I used one of these apps, I got a ball of fresh mozzarella cheese that had a best before date 2 or 3 days out for the equivalent of 50 New Zealand cents. It's fair to say I was totally hooked, and it was quickly followed by these thoughts of, wow, this is genius, and why the heck is no one doing this in Aotearoa? Which obviously led to the light bulb moment that I, of course, would bring this concept to New Zealand. A couple of months later, I was on a plane home with a mission to bring what would become Foodprint to life. If you aren't familiar with how Foodprint works, I'm going to play a quick video. Hopefully I can get this right. So once you've downloaded the app, and now is a really great time to do that if you haven't already, you're able to view and search for food that's available to rescue. You can receive push notifications from your favorite eateries, and you can apply filters based on your location, your dietary preferences, and the price. You make your selections within the app and a couple of purchases, and then you receive a countdown timer based on the eatery's opening hours, so you know how long you've got to collect that food on the same day. All of the food that's on the app is sold for a discount, starting from 30% off its original price, but often going for up to 80 or 90%, and every now and then you can grab something for free, but you've got to be really fast for those ones. Now, I want to be really clear that when I'm talking about surplus and imperfect food, I'm not talking about food that's furry or unrecognizable or only fit for pigs or worms. I'm talking about food that's, freshly baked breads and cakes that have been made that morning, sushi that's been rolled that morning, or salad that's been tossed together that same day. It's the exact same food that you would get if you walked into that eatery as normal, but they've found that they've got surplus on this day, so they've listed it on the app to enable them to reach a bigger audience and prevent that food from being wasted. We're currently operating in Auckland, Hamilton, Cambridge, Te Awamutu, Raglan, Wellington, Christchurch, and most recently Nelson. My goal is to have Foodprint available across all regions in Aotearoa and to help us contribute to meeting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal Target 12.3, which is by 2030, halve per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. Reducing food waste has been identified by the international think tank Project Drawdown as the #1 action that we can take to reduce global warming. We waste about 1/3 of the food that's produced for human consumption, and it accounts for up to 10% of total greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we need to be able to feed the world's growing population through the climate crisis. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of what I do and why I do it. And I thought I'd now move on to talk to you about some of the challenges and realities about what the journey has actually been like, because it's not all Instagram life. I'm what's referred to as a non-technical solo founder, and this is something that all of the startup textbooks will tell you not to do. The web development course that I did in Sweden was a wonderful introduction, but definitely didn't give me the skills required to build an app. I'm really lucky that I was able to find amazing technical partners who I really connected with right from our first meeting, but there were many, many meetings before I found them. I'd actually had them referred to me by a friend, and I could see from their portfolio that they had worked on other two-sided marketplaces, which gave me the confidence that they had the skills required to build what I was looking for. Now, I might be biased, but I think that they delivered a product that exceeded my expectations and is still on hand to build our new features and updates. Being a solo founder is one of those things that has many pros and cons. It's definitely a challenge, and I obviously haven't had the experience of working in a founding team, but I can only imagine that it's great to have that extra person there to act as someone to bounce ideas with, and they would usually bring complementary skills. The other side is that I, of course, get to make all of the decisions when it comes to the business, which is quite fun. With that, of course, I also need to own any bad decisions along the way. Given that I went out on my own, especially when I first started, it was really important to me to find a mentor, as I felt that having that sounding board would be really valuable. And it definitely seemed like there was a lot I didn't know when it came to running a business. Not long after Foodprint was in market, I came across the Sprout Accelerator. They're an ag tech and food tech focused accelerator program based in Palmerston North. I was accepted and took part in their 6-month accelerator during 2020. Now, given the wild ride that 2020 turned out to be, it was incredibly valuable having a weekly mentoring session. It provided a total lifeline, both for the business and, to be fair, my own mental health. I'd gone into Sprout looking for support on how to best approach our expansion, but it became quickly more about staying alive. So when the opportunity to enter the Creative HQ Climate Response Accelerator based out of Wellington in 2021 came up, I took it and was able to get expansion back on track. Both of these organizations have incredible mentors, huge networks that you can tap into, and that I continue to tap into, which is amazing. And I think one of the best parts as well is that you become part of a cohort with other founders of businesses who are going through the same challenges as you are. And it's amazing to be able to support each other through that. And I'm actually still in touch with people from both of those businesses sort of three years later, which is awesome. I feel really grateful to have been given both of these opportunities, but the reality is that New Zealand has an amazing, flourishing startup community, and I've been really blown away with how generous people are with their time. So there's definitely help out there if you're at the start of your journey. I think as well, it's important to acknowledge that while that mentoring and support is really well needed and really beneficial, one of my biggest learnings that goes along with it has also been knowing when to trust my gut, and because no one knows my business better than me. Admittedly, there's been times when I've gone with advice that didn't quite sit right with me at the time, and probably turned out to have been not the best thing to have done in that moment. So it's one thing to be able to go out and seek that advice, but it's another to know what to filter in and out and who you're taking what advice from. This is something that I hear a lot of other entrepreneurs, and especially other female entrepreneurs, talk about as well. I think that the best mentors are the ones that really get stuck in with you, who are committed to understanding the problem and helping you uncover all of the potential outcomes to help guide you to the best decision, rather than making assumptions before they fully understand the complexities of what you're dealing with. To me, modern entrepreneurship is most successful when it's driven by impact. As we all know, climate change is here. It's not a future problem. For me, it was never a question of if I would go into another area. For me, I felt that I needed to be in the climate space. And I find that it's really evident based on the young people who I speak to, and even people who I interview for roles here at Foodprint, is that Gen Zs are looking to work for companies who match their values. And despite the fact that I am well past a Gen Z, it's something that really resonates with me as well. I've been really lucky to, in my previous roles, work for companies who matched my values. And where I've been able to feel that the mahi that I've been doing has had meaning to me. I want to acknowledge my privilege to work within my values, but also show you that there is a way to carve your own path to work within your values. I think if you're driven to solve a problem that you're working on, you'll find that path no matter what your background or skill set, and you'll find a way to surround yourself with people who can help you out along the way. When I graduated, I could never have imagined that I would be doing what I'm doing now and go on to start an app. Apps barely existed at that time. And to give you some context, the only app that was on my Nokia 3310 that I had while I was at university was what's actually considered to be the very first app, and that's the game Snake. The first iPhone was released in 2017, which was the final year of my undergrad, and that model wasn't even available in Aotearoa. You know how there's that saying that your future career doesn't even exist right now? I often take pause on that statement because not in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that I'd be doing what I do now when I was at university. That's all from me. So back over to you, Nandini.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing that really interesting talk. It's truly so inspiring to hear such a beautiful journey through entrepreneurship. And I'd also really like to thank you for being so vulnerable and opening about the learnings and lessons you've learned along the way. I particularly loved hearing about the importance you place on social and environmental impact. As we move through the world, and like you mentioned, it's so important for businesses to have this social impact. And we're starting to see a lot more businesses pivot towards this. So it's super great to see trailblazers like yourself paving this pathway. And I'm sure everyone is feeling just as empowered and inspired as I am by you. So now I will move on to the Q&A section of today's talk. Once again, I will remind you all to please submit your questions to the Q&A section that's provided at the Zoom panel. So it should be live. Go ahead, upvote questions, and we'll start to move through them. Awesome. So I will now open that up. The first question I have is, what has been the most, you talked about like your challenges, but I guess what's been the most difficult part about setting up the business that really blindsided you? And if you could just kind of touch on those points.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say that that was COVID. I think it's fair to say that that blindsided the whole world. To give a little bit more context, so the Foodprint app went live in the App Store in June 2019, and we had this, amazing launch, this great first 6 months, and I came into 2020 really ready to expand across Aotearoa and kind of build on that excitement of our launch. And as I said, that was a huge reason of getting into the Sprout Accelerator program as well. So to go from, this business that was growing and growing and growing to 7 weeks or whatever it was of not being able to operate was really, really hard. And to be honest, after each lockdown, it's almost felt like starting all over again. Like, obviously it's not quite the very beginning, but it is really challenging in that respect. And a lot of who I had initially targeted in 2019 were like inner city eateries. That's where there's huge concentration of people. And so now the movements and people's behavior has completely changed. So we've had to really change sort of how we target the eateries we work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's like so inspiring to see you come out of that challenge and now still be able to flourish post-pandemic. So for that.
Yeah, and I know that saying like the pandemic sounds really cliche, but like really it has been the biggest challenge that I've faced and having to navigate through it. So yeah.
Awesome. So the next question I have is, what has been the reaction by the food industry and supermarkets to your app? Are they into the food security at all, or how have they felt?
Yeah, if I'm honest, it's a mixed bag. We obviously aren't working with every eatery, so some of them sort of often don't want to be sort of seen to be associated with anything to do with food waste. But the reality is, everyone knows that food waste happens in hospitality. And so actually the ones that are on board are the ones that are really excited to be proactively seen as doing something in the space, and showing that they are really focused on sustainability, that they're not willing to waste their food, that they really value their product, and that they're really excited to see some new customers through the app.
It's great to hear, and I think it's so important that everyone in this industry gets together to fight this, big food wastage issue. So it's awesome to see that you've kind of built like a community almost. Speaking of communities, there is a question here which talks about, you mentioned the amazing startup community that New Zealand has. So how could people like us connect with them, and where could we find this community?
Yeah, I think obviously I talked about doing the Sprout and Creative HQ accelerator programs, and that's two really great starting points. There's loads of meetups, there's different ones for different groups as well. I've seen, women in tech and migrants in tech kind of meetups and that sort of thing. And I think attending, events like this, and obviously we're slowly getting more and more in-person events coming back online. So connecting with other people in that way is really beneficial. And I think for me, you know, when I first started out, as I said, I was sort of searching for a mentor. I wasn't sure. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing at all. But I just sort of started reaching out to different people. And honestly, you know, you might have people say no, but you will also be able to find amazing people who will meet you for a coffee for 20, 30 minutes and, you know, help you out along the way. And I think the other thing is, you know, you don't get what you don't ask for. So to sort of get that help and get into those connections, you need to be able to put yourself out there and ask for them. Yeah, and you know, I think there was a couple of people that I met through, I think, one of the accelerator programs. There was a guy I met who'd applied for 3 programs before he got accepted into the one he got accepted into. So it's definitely a case of try and try again. And you know, if you do go for one of those accelerator programs and aren't successful, the best thing to help yourself is, and it can feel a bit icky and awkward at the time, but is to ask for feedback. You know, go back to that organization and say, you know, really bummed I didn't get in. What are you actually looking for? What can I change for when I apply next year? Because I'm really keen to be involved. And, you know, they might say something like, hey, you're not at the right stage of the journey, but come back to us in 6 months or 12 months time and you might be there. So.
Yeah, what you say like resonates with me completely. I mean, when you're trying to build a network, I know a lot of us, like me particularly, I felt so scared and anxious going out there. But I think once you get into it, it definitely gets easier. So it's great to hear that, you know, you felt that way, but you're still able to go and, you know, put yourself out there and build such a great network. You know, one question that someone brought up as well is more about Foodprint itself and the Foodprint's business model. So how do you, you know, measure growth, profitability, and success? And did you do any market research before the app was developed to see if there was a need in New Zealand?
Yeah, so I guess I'll attack that first part. That last part first. Yeah, I did quite a bit of market research. So, and I definitely was sure to extend it past, you know, asking mum if it was a good idea. But I was in that process of sort of meeting with people who could potentially build the app. And I was quite strategic around when I'd meet with people, and I'd usually ask to meet with them in a cafe. And so I'd sort of try and do it towards the end of the day. I'd have a chat with them around, you know, what their skills were, if they were interested, if it was something they could help with. And then after they'd left, and I'm going up to pay for the coffee, switch focus and chat to the eateries and try and understand what they had left, what they were doing with it, if they had any you know, if they had any way of making sure it didn't end up in the bin, or even if it did end up in the bin at some times, and then asking them that if there was a way to potentially make money off food that might otherwise get wasted, if they'd be interested. So that was sort of my yeah, I guess the basics of the market research. And then, yeah, when I was going to networking events and things, again, similar to this, I would often chat to people how they felt about getting discounted food. And people are usually pretty keen on that one. And then in terms of how we measure everything, so obviously, we're a tech platform, so we've got lots of numbers in the system, which is great. So yeah, as you mentioned, we're working with around 350 eateries and have over 70,000 customers. Our North Star metric is the number of orders, because that's obviously the point that we're making money. Foodprint is free for customers to download and also for eateries to join, and then we retain a percentage of each purchase that goes through the app. So that's why that North Star metric of number of orders is the one that we're really keen to see increase, because that's when our revenue increases. I think, did I cover all of the bits? There was quite a lot in that question.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. You definitely did. And you definitely went quite in depth into it, which is quite good to hear. So thank you for sharing that. My next question, I think, kind of jumps from that. It's how long did it really take to develop your app from start to finish?
Yeah, I'm really lucky, and it was fast. And I am the first to admit that it was really fast. So Foodprint was in the App Store within, by about 5 or 6 days, a year of me coming back to New Zealand. I sort of spent the first probably 4 months of that, you know, like working on a business plan. How's this actually going to work out? Doing that market research, meeting with people, sort of getting everything lined up. And once I found my technical partners, I think they started building it in around October or November of 2018, and then we were in the App Store June 2019. I think the more I talk to other people who have sort of built tech products, often it's years and years. So I'm the first to acknowledge that I was incredibly lucky, and we were able to get it across the line really fast.
Super, super impressive. The next question I have pertains to some of the challenges of bringing on, high waste sectors such as hotel food services versus small businesses. So what are the difference between those two, and what sort of challenges did that come up for you?
Yeah, so we don't at the moment really work with any hotel organizations. And a lot of the reason is sort of what I alluded to earlier around the food safety requirements of like food that's been on a buffet has got challenges. Really like keen to kind of continue that conversation with them. And, we do sort of occasionally speak to things like caterers who are in that same sort of boat. So we're constantly looking at ways that we can that we can work with them and adapt. And even if it's not a case of working with Foodprint, but working with them to actually work out how they can reduce food waste in other ways within the business. And then, when it comes to more of the sort of eateries and cafes who we work with mostly, we reach out to them and have a chat and understand, for us, I think it is really important that we are understanding what's happening within their business and where Foodprint sort of fits into that layer, because obviously it is a new thing for them to introduce and a new layer in their waste reduction strategy.
One question I do have, I think, talks a little bit more about the competition and competitors. So someone asked, Uber Eats already has a really wide network of eateries that they can kind of enter into this market easily by utilizing their network. So how do you stay ahead of the competition and threats like that?
Yeah, I think we provide a really different service for Uber Eats, both for our customers and or sort of for the customer side and the eatery side. So I think they're like a competitor in the sense that we're competing for that space on your phone, as that app space on your phone, and the sort of technical capacity of the eateries that we're working with. And there's definitely some crossover, but I wouldn't say that all of my eateries that we work, or all of the eateries that we work with, definitely wouldn't be on Uber Eats. I think as well, we've got, appeal that we're a New Zealand owned and operated business, which a lot of them really like, rather than Uber Eats that sends a whole lot of money that's tax-free offshore. So
we're definitely, I think, in New Zealand, huge advocates of supporting locals. So yeah. It's great to hear that. A question that has come up is, how do you recognize that your idea, Foodprint, was something that was really worth it and that you could build a profitable business off? I know you mentioned a bit about like seeing this overseas, but how did you think that New Zealand would react to it, and how did you realize that it was kind of a good idea?
Yeah, I think probably there's a lot of similarities between New Zealand and Sweden, where I was living at the time. And so I sort of thought that there'd be, a level of things that work there being transferable into New Zealand. I think when you look at, a lot of other New Zealand businesses, they are sort of an idea that's been inspired by something they've seen overseas, the likes of Trade Me, My Food Bag, Grab One, all of those are sort of things that have been modeled overseas and come to New Zealand. As I say, I spoke to a lot of people to understand what the sort of market would react, or how the market would react. And then I think that New Zealanders are really environmentally conscious. And so I felt like it would resonate, the idea would resonate with New Zealand. We've got this sort of clean green image, and I think it's important that we're doing things that proactively support that image in business. And as I said, we are in a climate emergency, and we really need to be thinking about what we're doing and how that impacts. So there's definitely an educational role that Foodprint plays in the market for that as well.
And I think that's a testament to the amazing things you've achieved in just 3 years, like the 70,000 customers. It's just incredible. So, congratulations on that. And I hope it keeps growing and all New Zealanders get on board to this. A question that we have here is, regarding funding. So how do you go about securing the funding to build this platform? And if you had any tips for the audience on that?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky, and Foodprint's actually mostly funded through my family, so I haven't had to go down the sort of VC funding route. That said, given the fact that I've done a couple of accelerators, I've definitely been exposed to that. And those are really awesome opportunities for those who are seeking funding. And a lot of the people that I know in those cohorts that I've gone through with have used that as an opportunity to tap into those, angel investor and funding networks. They also, sort of a couple of times a year, I get an invitation to update them on where we're at. And if I am looking for funding, have that opportunity to go back and pitch to their investors when the time is right. And there's a huge number of organizations across the country who are sort of working in that funding space. So again, it's one of those things of sort of going out and finding who's the right funding opportunity for you. I have also had some waste minimisation funding from local councils. So the waste levy, so the money that's paid when anything is sent to the tip, essentially goes into a pool, the waste levy, which is administered by the Ministry for the Environment. It's split half and half. Half of it is funded through the Ministry for the Environment for national level programs, and the other half goes to councils and is divided up based on the size of the different councils. So, and those funding rounds come up once or twice a year. So I've received funding from Auckland Council, Wellington Council, the Canterbury Joint Waste Committee, and also Nelson Council. So that's been really great in terms of helping essentially when you don't have to give away any equity for that money, which is awesome. And there's heaps of community grants out there for especially a lot of things that are in sort of the climate and waste space. It's something that a lot of people are happy to give money to. And also the Creative HQ Accelerator also, we received, all of the participants in that received $20,000, which was very helpful at the time.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what sometimes the audience and what I experienced was I always thought funding was going to be really challenging, but like you mentioned, there's such an abundance in New Zealand, and it's really just about going out there and, like you said, reaching out to the people who align with your company and they'd love to help. So it's great to see and hear that. I've actually got two questions which are quite similar, so I might combine them. The question revolves around, some of these eateries and people that you partner with will sell foods that may be imperfect, like you said, or will have mistakes. I guess, would you be able to share, what are those mistakes and how do you ensure food quality and safety?
Yeah, so when it comes to food quality and safety, anything that's sold through the app still needs to fall under the eatery's food control plan. So that's the legal requirement for anyone who's selling food in New Zealand and is administered by local councils. So because Foodprint doesn't actually touch the food ourselves, again, we don't have to have our own food control plan, it falls under their one. So the food has to be something that they are happy to sell, essentially, and that fits within that plan. In terms of what some of those imperfections or mistakes might be, we've had the whole cake sold on the app where the icing's got a little bit smushed or something, or the eatery's accidentally baked this cake this Wednesday, but the order was for next Wednesday. Or someone ordered a cake and wrote "Happy Birthday, Mum" on it and then didn't come and pick it up. That's sort of some of the things that cause food to go on the app. Or things like slices or cookies that, are quite easily broken. So we've had bags of broken cookies on the app, or a slice that hasn't quite worked, or even we had some macaroons where they'd forgotten to put the raspberry powder that gave it the colouring in. So, it's a case of mistakes happen. And even though we didn't have the raspberry powder in that macaroon, they still tasted exactly the same. That powder was purely there for colouring, but they obviously wouldn't sell those as part of their normal offering. And so they're able to kind of offer it to the little, if you know Foodprint club, and still get money for that without having to see it be wasted.
Awesome. And the next question I have is around inspiration and admiration. So the question is around What is an app or a business idea that you've looked to for inspiration or one that you admire the most?
Oh, that's a tough one. Get the tough one to the end. I think, there's not one that's really, I guess, calling out to me, but I think I'm always looking out for what's on the horizon, what's coming, who's going to give me inspiration. And I think, as I mentioned, I've spent time living in the States, in the UK, and in Sweden, so I'm always looking at what's happening overseas as well, and seeing what other inspiration I can bring back there as well.
Sounds amazing.
Sorry, I don't have a solid
Yeah.
answer.
No, that's great to hear. I think I'm going to wrap up the Q&A section now with just one last question, which is, I guess, what's next for Foodprint, and if there's any exciting things that you would want to mention?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is working on expansion. So obviously, as I mentioned, we just launched in Nelson just under a month ago. So it's really exciting. We are sort of continuing to support Nelson through the next couple of weeks, and then we'll be looking at where's our next region. So stand by for that one. If we're not currently operating somewhere where you are and you'd like to see us, do let us know. It really helps, guide where we go next. And then we've got a couple of exciting updates, more on the eatery side at the moment, that we're working on. So looking forward to getting those rolled out later in the year, but not really saying what they are just yet.
Super exciting to hear. And once again, thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your story and for answering all the questions today. I'd also like to thank everyone for their questions and all your attention and participation. It's been such a pleasure to discuss modern entrepreneurship with you, Michael, and I wish you all the best on your journey through entrepreneurship.
Thanks so much, Nandini.
And with that, I think we're up to the stage where we're wrapping up today's talk. So it's been such a pleasure again to have you all here today. The Connect and Develop series helps bring professional development talks covering topics designed to help you understand and adapt to the changing world of work. Today was Talk 1 of 2023, and you've got 3 more to go. Talk 2 will be held on the 13th of June, when our MC Liz Barry will be discussing successful career pivoting with Dr. Kate Regal Von West. We would love to see you there, so please head to the website and register now. Connect and Develop is open to everyone, so I also encourage you all to bring along your friends, students, and alumni who would love to join the talk too. We'll be sending out a survey shortly to get your feedback, so please look out for that in your inbox. And thank you again for joining us today.